Thank you for tuning in to OCA Greater Houston's Happy Fest. My name is Evie Caro, an OCA volunteer and moderator for tonight's Happy Fest Q&A. If you're joining us on YouTube, remember that you can leave your comments and questions in the live chat. Now please welcome our first guest, Asis Sethi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for premiering our film, A Bloody Mess. It was an honor. Thank you.
So for our first question today, this is your first film in your production company, Flyaway Films. What made you choose this story and topic in particular to be the debut of Flyaway?
I felt it served as a voice for South Asian women and women in general. A Bloody Mess brings together several things important to me as a filmmaker, as a South Asian, shedding light on issues in our community, and as a woman normalizing the conversation surrounding menstruation. And also as a parent of two daughters, exploring the nuances of a South Asian family at crossroads because of generational differences. So I can tell you this project felt just right. The crew was amazing. The cast was amazing. It was truly a team effort. And of course, my sister, Sethi, who's the writer, she wrote this brilliant script, and it was just a perfect amalgamation of crew and cast working together.
Thank you. Our second question is, Varsha is ostracized by her mom and considered unclean while on her period. How closely related is your experience growing up to this?
To be honest, the fact that I was on my period, it never stopped me from participating in any activities, unlike some of my friends and people I spoke to before I was working on this film, before even the writing stage of this film. And that's where I found out that their experiences were much different. They had many more things that they could not do. They could not enter the temple, they could not enter the kitchen, they could not cook, etc. But I didn't grow up like that. I mean, I remember hiding pads in the washroom when I was, my period started. And I also remember saying, I don't feel well, instead of just saying, I was on my period to other male family members. But I also remember whispering this to my mom. It was always a hush-hush situation when I was, when I got my period for the first time, or the first few years. But as I grew older, it was much different. We were able to talk about it freely in our house. And I was able to even tell my dad, I'm on my period. I've ran out of pads. While you come home from work, can you grab a pack of pads for me? So it started changing slowly.
What do you, just to kind of go off of your explanation, what do you think sort of changed it? Do you think it's just like you growing up, or?
Yeah, I think just growing up and realizing that it's a natural process, and you don't need to hide that natural, you don't need to hide these things. You should be able to talk about it freely, especially it's part of your reproduction process, and it's just a period. To tell you the truth, it's not something that's so complicated. It's not a sickness, and you might not be feeling well, but that's just because you're in pain. So you should be able to tell your parents, your family members, your friends that you're going through that pain, instead of saying I'm not well or I feel sick, which truly is that you're just on your period. That's it.
Did you feel like you've faced any like stigma against it as you were growing up that kind of stopped you throughout your process?
Not me personally, but I do feel that there is a lot in the community. I do see a lot happening. I do see, like, for example, if I'm at work and if I'm talking to a male colleague who asks me if I'm not feeling well, I would always say, yeah, I'm just not feeling well. I won't be able, I would never be able to freely say, hey, I'm on my period, right? But with females, on the other hand, it's different. And let's say if I got my period and I'm in pain and I want to call in sick at work, I naturally would not say, hey, I cannot come in because I just got my period. You would actually end up saying, hey, I'm calling in sick today, or I'm not feeling well and I can't make it to work. So those little things, I've seen those and I've experienced those, and I feel like it's something that women should not be experiencing. It's something natural. It's something that I feel is a gift from God, and we should not be going through that process. I feel we should be easily able to say, hey, I'm on my period.
Yeah, totally agree. So this is the last question that was pre-written, but Varsha is a first-generation modern girl with a traditional South Asian mother. What dialogue do you want to start with young girls who are growing up with the juxtaposition of beliefs, one of Western ideals and one other with values from their home country?
I think it's important to keep a balance of both worlds. I think it's important to recognize that each family is unique. Their traditions and their cultural values are embedded in each family, and it varies in each families as well. And it's not necessarily tied to a country or even a religion. And realistically, you can't even call up your workplace, like I said, if you have cramps. And I think men and women alike need to stop whispering about periods. It is not a sickness. It is a very natural process for young women. And I think that needs to be reiterated. I also think men, along with women, need to start the conversation.
Mhm.
Are you on your period? Can I get you a tampon? Can I help you in any way?
Just pivoting a little bit, even though these are uncertain times, it's important to remember that 2020 is a census year and an election year, so it is a crucial time to make a difference. Why is it important, even during a lockdown, to do our due diligence?
Mhm. Um, Filmmaking and the arts is such a vital component of communicating revolutionary thoughts and ideas. And during these times of lockdown, it is the medium of the arts that can assist in spreading awareness and bring suppressed voices to the forefront. So it's very important, especially in these days and times.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now I'm going to transition to the next filmmaker.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Peter Trinh.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you to Happy Fest for hosting the film this year and powering through the pandemic with making the festival virtual.
Yeah. So first question. You've grown up in the Bay Area and now live in Seattle. Both areas have a robust food scene. What made you land on Chef Soma as the topic of your film?
Yeah, I mean, besides being a fan of her food and Chef Soma being local to my community here in Seattle, um, I'm a big proponent of food being a major catalyst of how traditions pass down from generation to generation. And Chef Soma truly believes in that. She makes soba noodles the way that her grandma taught her how to make. And it's kind of cool that she has a little daughter, and when her daughter was a little infant, she would put her daughter in a carrier in her back and go into the restaurant and roll out the noodles as you saw in the film while carrying her baby. So she's already trying to pass that on to her daughter as well. And I think just the fact that she is the only woman doing this in America is a big enough deal to shine a light on this. If you know a little bit about Japanese cuisine, it's kind of rare to see women being chefs at Japanese restaurants. And actually, in Japan, with all the great sushi restaurants, for a while, women were not allowed to be sushi chefs in Japan. So for Chef Soma to basically bring kind of like a lost art of the handmade soba noodle to this region as a woman, I think is incredibly courageous, and it was just a great story to tell.
Thank you. Our next question is, your short acknowledges Chef Soma's cooking is tied deeply to her Japanese roots. What would you say is the biggest cultural difference between the way American chefs prepare food versus the Japanese?
Yeah, the film kind of touched upon this, and Chef Soma mentioned it in her interview, that in Japan, if you've been fortunate enough to go to Japan, you'll notice that the restaurants there are very specialized in one dish. You can go to a ramen restaurant and there's like literally two things on the menu. And it's like, do you want your ramen with broth, or do you want your ramen dry with broth on the side? And in America, Japanese cuisine has often been diluted because I think the American palate kind of wants, it's kind of like a Cheesecake Factory syndrome where people just want a large menu of things, and it really dilutes the quality of the food when a restaurant is trying to cater to so many different choices. So, I think the attention to detail that Japanese chefs pay to their food over in Japan compared to America, and this is not to say that America doesn't have Japanese restaurants that are specialized in one thing, but it does seem like a lot of restaurants here, if you go into a ramen restaurant, they're also going to serve, rice plates and tempura, for instance. But in Japan, you can go to a restaurant and just get tempura only, and it's probably like the best tempura you'll ever have. So I think the attention to detail and just that focus and that diligence to really focus on delivering that one dish that they're good at. I think that's a really big difference between the two different cultures.
Thank you. Our next question is, this short film is a shift from your previous work, which is more serious. Do you think that you will stay on the path or go back to being serious?
I mean, I think the projects that I work on kind of comes to me, and it depends on the time. I guess it almost kind of happens organically. And a few years ago, one of my first films was around the time that that President Trump was elected, and there was a lot of anger and concern at that time with the minorities and people of color, and I made that film based around that. And then a few years ago, I made another film about Alzheimer's, and it happened to be during that time in my life that I had a personal experience with dealing with that. And then with this now, to be honest, after doing a couple of more serious films, I did want to do something that was a little bit more fun. But I've always been inspired by a lot of the good food documentaries that I've seen, and Anthony Bourdain as well. So I really wanted to go in that direction and do something with food. So yeah, I mean, hard to tell what direction I'm going to head in the future. So it's going to be whatever happens to strike a chord with me at that time. But for sure, this was a lot of fun to film this and produce this film.
Thank you. To kind of go off that question, do you have any upcoming projects that you are allowed to talk about?
The pandemic has really put things on hold for myself, as well as I'm sure a lot of artists. Soma has been this Soma project has been great in that it's opened doors for me to producers and other folks who want to collaborate. But I premiered this film late last year, and discussions had started with new projects, but they kind of got put on hold when the pandemic started. So that's not really something I can talk about, but moving forward, I'd like to maybe dive a little bit into the narrative realm and into script writing, as well as some music video work. So yeah, I definitely hope that once everyone is safe after this pandemic, that I can get back to some of those projects that were in the early stages.
Do you have anything else that you like to, major themes or anything from your film that you like to point out to viewers?
I think we kind of touched upon it. Just the whole the attention to detail and the focus on a specific craft that Japanese culture and the cuisine have, and just the appreciation for that culture and passing traditions down. And this is just for any culture, any Asian culture. I was raised by my parents are immigrants, and they raised me to they cooked me all their traditional dishes and everything like that, and it's something that I want to pass down to my kids as well. So if we don't take upon that role of passing on tradition, then ultimately it dies, and I think that would be extremely sad for all these rich cultures to kind of disappear. So I just want to kind of encourage people, especially first generation people in America, to make sure that our cultures get passed down from generation to generation.
Thank you so much. Just to kind of circle back, or not really circle back, but just pivot a little bit. Even though these are certain times, it's important to remember that 2020 is census year and an election year. So it is a crucial time to make a difference. Why is it important, even during a lockdown, to do our due diligence?
I think so. Asians are the fastest growing minority group in America, and we've definitely grown a lot since the last census. So it's important that everybody takes part and make sure that we're all counted, because the census is how the governments at different levels allocate resources, and this can range anywhere from a pie with financial and with how resources are allocated that way, but even little things like how translation services and things like that, governments use the census to tell which communities need those services. So it's important to be counted so that we get the help that we need.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
now
you.
I'm going to, yeah, thank you. Now I'm going to transition to the next filmmaker. Hi, everyone. This is Thavary Krouch. Sorry, did I pronounce that right?
In Cambodian and Khmer, it's Krouch. So yeah, perfect.
All right. First off, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Evie. You guys are doing a wonderful job. This is amazing how you've been able to pivot from an in-person film festival to a virtual one. So it's wonderful how it in many ways mimics the experience of an in-person film festival. So kudos, guys.
Thank you so much. So our first question for today is, the illness or reason why the father left is never revealed. Why do you think it's important to leave those aspects open-ended?
I've never been a fan of films that tell me too much. I like the mystery. I like not having everything explained and told to me. And in many ways, this film is built on being open-ended, from the scene with Carlos and his phone to the very end. Before we see the final scene, we cut to black to sort of leave that space for the audience to come up with their own conclusions and fill in their own details. It's really important to me that the audience is also actively telling the story too. We don't want passive viewers or a passive audience. We want an audience that's actively thinking about and feeling what the characters are feeling. So it was really important to me that that the audience also participated in the telling of the story.
Our second question is, Sophia finds a proxy father in Carlos, who is in a similar situation as her father. What significance do you think this loans to Sophia for her growth process?
So yes, Carlos is a proxy. He is a stand-in for Sophia's father, as well as she is a proxy to Carlos, a stand-in for his daughter. And we wanted to sort of mirror that relationship in the writing of that particular scene in the alley. It was really important for me that we had a moment, an opportunity for Sophia to redeem herself, to sort of see that in Carlos's story, that her father's story, whatever the specifics of that backstory is a little bit more complex and more nuanced. As in Carlos' experience, it's not, as he says to her, it's not that easy. And I wanted to provide an opportunity for her to get past the feeling of angst and anger and resentment, to actively saying, okay, let's make amends, let's move forward, let's move on, and make peace with our relationships. So, Carlos is also a foil in that way, because here he is sort of shedding light on her as a redeeming character, and to also highlight more tension and conflict between those two characters. They're sort of pushing against each other. And Sophia's in a position to push towards healing, towards encouraging him to connect and reconnect with his daughter. And then you sort of, in the scene, when we're left with him, again, going back to that open-ended question, you have to decide as the viewer, does he actually connect with his daughter? Does he make that phone call? So it's a growth process for Sophia as well as Carlos. If we're thinking of the glass half full, then we're thinking that Carlos does actually take action, have agency in his relationship with his daughter as well. So it's interesting because, you know, there's all these devices that I'm playing with. The bitter melons itself is sort of a MacGuffin. Like, we have a device, we have an object that's sort of helping to move the story forward, that's helping to create the plot. Ultimately, it's not about the bitter melons. It's not about this particular object. It's about the relationships that they're sort of, you know, working their way towards, working themselves through. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Just to kind of go off that question, why did you choose to use bitter melon as a device? Like, why bitter melon?
I've often been asked this question, why bitter melons? Such a contentious fruit vegetable. It has seeds, so I guess it's a fruit. Asian culture, Asian cuisine. And I wanted to play with that. And I thought it would be a great, food is very visual, just like we saw in the documentary Soma. It's very visual. It evokes memories. I thought it was just a great challenge to work with that in that space. So featuring a food that could be a great metaphor, because yes, it's bitter. It's very, very bitter, but medicinal as well. You know, a lot of times in life, it's, you know, when we go through pain and suffering, those are very bitter moments that also help us to grow. So I wanted to sort of play with that metaphor.
Thank you. So our next question is, love and forgiveness conquers all in the story. What are your hopes for the audience after watching this film?
I want them to be inspired to know that there's hope in healing their own relationships to a loved one, whether that's a parent, a child, their relationships to themselves. You know, life is really short, and I wanted a happy ending. I wanted, or at least an ending that pointed towards hope, right? Because we can't assume that even at the end that Sophia and her father have this perfect relationship now that she's, you know, she's in his home and she's offering her peace offering in the form of bitter melons. We can't fully assume that, because in life it's not that easy, right? But I want to provide at least a choice. And the choice being, please let go of the resentment, of the pain, of the suffering, so that you can move towards healing, because life is too short. It's too short. We're not promised tomorrow. We're not promised the next minute. And a regret that we should not live with is the regret of not making amends with the people that we care about.
Just to kind of pivot again, same as I asked the other two filmmakers, why do you think it's important to like fill out the census and make sure your voice is heard?
Oh my gosh. We have a privilege, the privilege to vote, the privilege to be politically engaged. If the last 4 years, the last couple of weeks have shown us anything, it's to be politically engaged, to be aware of what we can do to make a difference. You know, as Peter mentioned, we are the fastest growing immigrant group, minority group in the United States. There's power in numbers, and to be complacent, to not take action, to say that I'm not politically active, which is to sort of get run over. And that is a waste. That is a waste of opportunity, of time. And it's a waste of the privilege that we have. So, you know, we need to get counted. And it's not difficult. These are not difficult things to do, to show up, to complete your census form, to send it in, to do it online, to go out and vote. Those are not difficult things to do. So I think it's just a matter of showing up. So yes, it's important because our democracy, our country, our state of freedom is being threatened, and it's riding on this upcoming election. So yes, everyone get out and vote.
Thank you so much. We're now going to transition to like a panel with all three directors. Hi everyone, thank you guys so much.
Hi.
So for this question's for everyone. I guess Thavary could go first, and then Asis, and then Peter. With the current state we're in, how do you feel the film industry will change after we return to a similar state of normal? Will this affect your writing or planning for your next project?
How will it change? While we're in COVID and post-COVID? Gosh, I mean, so I work for the Chicago Film Office. So these are conversations we're having all the time. How do we set up protocol and guidelines so that crew members can return to work, return to making films safely? And I know we'll head towards that direction. I think the number one thing to keep in mind is safety first. And, you know, if you're not comfortable being on set, in certain settings, then you have the right to say, no, I don't want to work on the set. So yeah, a lot of conversations are going on right now. And if anything, has brought us closer together as a community, locally anyway, in Chicago, to talk about these things that will help protect sort of each sector, whether you're an actor, whether you're working commercials, whether you're an indie filmmaker. I think we're all sort of looking out for each other. So these conversations are ongoing, but safety is certainly first. And then, of course, there's the additional conversation around equity and inclusion and diversity. So it's a tall order, but these are all things that need to be addressed. And, you know, we'll continue having those conversations.
Well, I feel like Thavary made a really good point. Safety comes first. And if we talk about theaters being back, you know, feature films and the future of feature film, I feel it might be in jeopardy, but I think it will take some time, and it would eventually get back to normal. But I feel right now, web series, anything digital, is more of what people are looking for, what funders are looking for currently, especially. And moviegoers, I think they will still go watch movies once the vaccine is out. I don't think there would be any change in. I feel they might even enjoy the movie going process even more because they're so tired of staying at home and watching films on their TV all day long and watching Netflix or watching films and viral videos on laptops. So I think they would want that experience, but I guess that would happen once the vaccine is out.
Yeah, I agree. I think the effects that we're feeling now are hopefully temporary. I think everybody wants to return to normal, and yeah, I mean, if a vaccine comes out successfully, sometime in the future, I think we can return back to normal. But I think right now is a great time for indie filmmakers. So, for people to put things out online, for things to go viral, because I think there's a big hunger for that, to watch things online. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity, and I agree with what everyone else is saying too, is that safety's first, and until there's like a vaccine that people can feel confident about, that's when we'll probably return to normal. I think I enjoy indie films and large big budget feature films too, so I definitely hope that I can return to a movie theater soon and watch some major Chris Nolan film or something. But I think for now I think it's a good time to just kind of be creative and post things online, and people tune in.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And remember to follow them on social media.
Thank you.
That completes our 4th day of films. Please join us for our next block of films tonight at 7 p.m. The theme is Resilient Female Protagonist. Before we end, I'd like to acknowledge the current racial injustices, particularly against our Black communities. We hope to stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Please remember to visit tinyurl.com/BLMAAPI to learn concrete Houston-specific ways to be involved. We will also be conducting a special panel next week to discuss the current climate and ways we can engage and best implement our calls to action. Stay tuned for more details. Thank you for joining us at Happy Fest and have a good afternoon.
We would like to acknowledge the grief and outrage right now, especially within our Black communities. Our city, Houston, continues to hurt. George Floyd was a native Houstonian, and according to the Houston Chronicle, we have had 6 police killings this past month alone.
As Asian Americans, we have to acknowledge and interrogate our own anti-Blackness and relative privilege within American society. We have to actively unlearn our own biases. It was Black activists who pushed against racist naturalization laws and supported Asian Americans after the racist murder of Vincent Chen.
Black activists stepping into action have benefited our community in profound ways. We must move beyond being a bystander and join the larger movement of Black Lives Matter. Join us in donating, protesting, petitioning, educating ourselves, and supporting our Black brothers and sisters in whatever way we can. Visit tinyurl.com/BLMAAPI, all caps, for more detailed ways to help, including Houston-specific bail funds, scripts to call local representatives, and translated letters to our family members, all of which you can join us in doing in between screenings. On behalf of OCA Greater Houston and the Happy Fest Committee, thank you for joining us on this podcast.